Financial topics, trending news, politics all come together here at the Vault.
Well, Demetra Moore, thank you for joining me today. Obviously, it's a day off for both of us, but we're both hard at work as always, right?
Right, right.
Um, First and foremost, let me begin by expressing my gratitude, one, for being a client, and one of my biggest supporters. I truly appreciate you.
You're welcome.
We're going to talk a little bit about our history. But prior to that, I want to discuss some of the successes that you've had over the last 2 years since we met. Obviously, some things have changed in your life. You've sold a home, you've
Right,
opened up a new business, you've
right.
maxed out your qualified contributions, you've moved to a new city,
Right.
you've negotiated your own salary, and you just have better quality of life and a better work balance. And we're going to touch on all those, but I'd like you to kind of start wherever you'd like to. And what was the probably the most difficult part about all those things? And
Mhm.
then talk to me about, how you felt before and after you made those decisions.
Well, Charlie, that's a really interesting question. The most difficult part for me would be I would say shifting my mindset, because I was in a certain space in my life and talking to people who were thinking like me. I didn't have a lot of people in my circle that were challenging me to think differently. And that goes to your point of selling the home and all of the other things. When you're around people who think just like you, you're going to continue to follow the flow. But conversations such as the ones you and I've had, we're always like, well, what if, right? What if you thought about this a little bit differently? What would be different? And that was the hardest thing, was coming outside of that box to see that there was another option. Yeah.
So tell me about when you first thought about selling the home, and then the day after you close the door,
Right.
shut it down, and you were just like, okay, this is over,
Right.
I'm done with it. What did that feel like?
Well, when I first decided to sell the home, I kept thinking, I've been here 15 years. Who sells a house after 15 years? You're almost done. Everybody kept saying, you're almost done. You're
Right.
almost done. And I was turning 40. I was 39 at the time. So the day the house sold and I went to close and all that stuff, it was my 40th birthday. And I just remember signing the papers with my real estate agent. She gave me a birthday card and all this stuff. And I go down to Mellow Mushroom, which was right next door to the lawyer's office. I go in I'm walking through the strip mall like, I cannot believe I am homeless. That's what I kept saying. I am homeless. And I went to Mellow Mushroom. I ordered a drink, ordered some lunch, and I just sat there. And I had this check in my hands, and I'm like, I have money, but I am homeless. I don't have an address for the very first time in my life. And that was on a Monday. And 2 days later, I was flying out to, of course, your office, right?
Right.
So I'm sitting there like, what do I do now? Where do I go from here? So it was fearful, a lot of fear at the beginning, because I've been there 15 years, and growing up, not having a lot, owning a home, being the first one in my family to own a home spoke volumes.
Right.
And now I'm 40 years old without that home, and I've been there 15 years and nobody understood why I got rid of it. I would say that was scary for me, and it was hard to explain to others. And what others thought of me now had changed, because they were like, oh, she has the quote unquote good job. She bought the house. And now this crazy girl has sold her house. And now I got to explain to people I'm following a dream, which nobody believed in. So that part was definitely scary.
Well, correction on that. I believed in your dream.
Well, yeah, you did. But, family and friends who only saw things a certain way, they were like, well, don't you want to hold on to your quote unquote good job?
Right.
So I couldn't I learned at that moment to stop sharing that with them, because they couldn't see what I saw.
Right.
And it helped a lot when I, of course, came to Florida and, of course, hung out with you all as well and worked. but it allowed me to be around people at a moment in my life that was a big transition. Right. So it was scary, but yet exciting at the same time, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the day, because I remember the day I first opened up shop and started, finally got the rubber stamp from the IRS saying, this is your entity. Right. And, that was a scary moment. And the reason why it was scary was because you just don't know how it's going to turn out. You know what I mean? And, luckily I'm here 10 years later still doing this, and it worked out pretty darn well, right? And it's like, it's amazing when we take a risk on ourselves, and that was like one of the main things that I wanted you to do was believe in yourself, right? Like you have every skill set you need, right? Exploit it. You know what I mean? Go after it, go get it. And, the confidence that I got from knowing that there were all these different financial firms that wanted my services, but I'm like, well, what do they really want me for, right?
Absolutely.
And I think they're willing to exploit my talents, but are they really going to help me grow the way I need to? And the answer to that was no. So, that's why I decided to open up my own practice, become independent. And so tell me about your first day, the jitters that you were feeling, and now look at you, and we're going to get into it 2 years later, how well you were actually doing.
Well, when I was on my job, and I just remember having conversations with people, I'm going to leave, right? I'm going to leave. They were like, are you crazy? You travel, you have all the company perks and all this stuff. But to your point, it wasn't taking me down the path where I wanted to go for my life. It just wasn't. And the more and more I thought about it and spoke with people who were in those places where they wanted to be, and were not saying that it was easy, right? But they were enjoying the work they were putting in to get to that next level, definitely changed my perspective. Now, the jitters I felt when I was preparing for that letter of resignation, oh my, I started a 90-day countdown. And every morning I got up and I would, draw a line through 90th day. Now it's, 89 and so forth. And it was easy to look at the numbers every day. But once it got to like 3 days, I was like, oh God, like I've been here 17 years of my life. Yeah. What do I do differently? I don't even know what was supposed to happen. I've always had a job. Yeah. But the date, when that day came to turn it in, there was no fear, no anxiety, nothing. It just felt like, I'll say a sense of peace came over me. I turned the letter in and they were like, what are you doing? Are you serious right now? You're going to give up your career to do something you're unsure about? And I just remember having those conversations, and I thought to myself, you are unsure. I don't know what it looks like. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Before you go further, I want to let people know, just you had been with the company about 17 years, right?
Yeah.
And you were the top, I'd say top 1 to 5, top 10, however you want to call it. I mean, because everybody's going to have their own opinion about themselves, right? But you were probably the top practice implementer at LPL. Right? They sent you to all the top brokerages, all the top producers and practices, right? Yeah. And the beauty of that is it goes to show, and I noticed this right away, your professionalism, your diligence, your like everything about you. And you had told me this, like, people have tried to hire me a lot. And I was like, I can see that. You know what I mean? I can absolutely see that. And I was like, that's what made me feel like you were such a star, and you just needed that push.
Right.
You know what I mean? And once you got it, it's like you flourished. Absolutely flourished. So please continue. I just wanted to put that in there.
Well, no, and I appreciate you saying that, because to your point, when I was traveling with my job, I met some amazing people, and they were all powerful in their own right. And some of the conversations we had over lunch, and, they will be like, if you're open for a job, hey, come work for me. Right. And I would always say, no, I'm okay here. But they would always say, you're more talented than you give yourself credit for. And I would take it with a grain of salt, like, okay, yeah, you just, maybe you're happy because I got your book of business moved over, right? But then I kept hearing it over and over and over. And it was an older gentleman I worked with, and he wasn't tech savvy at all. And I just remember him talking to me one day, and he said, I'm old and you're probably not going to listen to me because I can't use the computer like you, just making jokes about it. But then he said, I want you to really hone your skills. He was like, you have great, professionalism, but people like you.
Right.
And what you bring to the table. So it's beyond where you work. It's who you are that we enjoy working with. Amen. So what I want you to do is really think about what you can do with that and how that can change your life. And I just remember sitting there and I thought, okay, I'm going to put that in my pocket and think about it, right? So when I left, it just made me think differently. He even mailed me a thank you card saying the same thing. You have the ability to be great. And after a while, Charlie, it became like, it's not a grain of salt if everybody's saying it. Right. It's something I need to really hone in on. So that was one of the things that actually got me to where I am.
For sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about now, you now moved to a new city. Right. You are now in ATL, Georgia.
Well, the name of my business is More Out of Life, like my last name, Moore, More Out of Life. You can find me at moreoutoflife.com or demetramoore.com. They lead you to the same place. And you can, of course, email me if you like at Demetra@More Out of Life. And that is more like my last name. People get it mixed up. It's Moore outoflife.com. And you can definitely pretty much give me a call at 704-458-8545. If there's any questions, feel free to reach out. I love to, talk to you about where you are and, where you're trying to go and what gaps are in between. So that's my little spiel.
Entrepreneurs specifically.
Yes. Entrepreneurs specifically. Now, if you are still on your job and you're trying to figure out, okay, she kind of talked to leaving the job, but I don't really know how that worked. Definitely inbox me. I love to, have a conversation with you and help you if that's what you choose to do. So, yeah, feel free to reach out. But to your point, Charlie, what was it like being here in Atlanta? That too was a big transition. I had been in Charlotte 20 years.
Right.
And a client I was working with doing some part-time coaching at the time reached out, made an offer. And at first, I think I declined it. I think I told you, Charlie, about 3 times. Right. That last time I was brave enough to actually negotiate. Before it was always like, no, I don't want to do this. No, I don't want to do this. But the last time it was like, well, why don't you ask for what you want? Worst case scenario, the answer is no. You have nothing to lose.
Absolutely.
And that, of course, was a shift from the employee mindset to more of the entrepreneur mindset, because on your job, you can try to negotiate, but you only have so much leeway because you actually need that job.
Right.
Well, I was in a position where I didn't need that offer. And that felt really good. I had never been in that space in my life before. So to be there, yeah. And I could say no and be okay with it.
Right.
And when the last time came and we had a whole discussion about it, it felt good to be empowered to say, I want this or I don't want to do this, and to come to a deal, which is where I am now.
Amazing.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful thing to see people understanding their leverage,
right?
But understanding the value that they have and they bring to the table. That's one
Absolutely.
thing I've always wanted to. Anytime I'm dealing with young people, I'm mentoring, coaching, anything like that, I always want them to know what their value is.
Absolutely.
A little bit about your work-life balance, and how you've been able to, because clearly with no strings attached to you, you can do what you want.
Right,
you
right.
And instead of them shipping you to some Egypt place, for you to help somebody implement their practice, you are going to where you want to go.
Right.
And doing the things that you want to do at the specific times when you want to do them.
Right.
So let's talk about that for a second.
Well, it definitely feels really amazing. But I will tell you, the funny thing about it was that when I first left my job, I didn't understand how to use that freedom. when it came to taking a day off, I got a doctor's appointment or whatnot. Previously, before, I used to say, oh, I got to request that, or I got to make sure it's okay. We walk away with that mindset because you've had it so long. And once I got like into my quote unquote groove of things, I remember saying, I'm going to get up early in the morning, work from 8 to 10, take a break from 11 to 1. I'm going to lunch with my friends. I'm going to take a nap if I want to. Yeah. And it felt amazing to do what I wanted to do on my time and not have to get approval for taking a day off or approval for an appointment. Charlie, I began to embrace being in charge of my own life and having the thing that I had been craving so long, and that was freedom.
Yeah.
And to have that sort of freedom, and at the beginning, it is a little intimidating because we never had it. Right. But once you get that taste of it, it's like, I don't want to go back. Like you can't take take me out here and let me be able to do what I want, and then tell me I have to go back inside the fence. It doesn't work.
Right. I think one of the other important details in that is, and you just touched on it a second ago, talking about how the freedom that you get from this. Clearly, it's difficult because the buck stops with you, right?
Right.
And if you don't work, you don't eat, right?
Absolutely.
That's the part that really gets your butt going. It's like, wait a minute, I ain't got a check coming in no more, unless of course I go out and get them. So, I think that part, you're right, is scary at first, but once you start to solidify your ground and you have a decent foundation, then that confidence comes along, right?
Absolutely.
And then you go from confidence to being comfortable, right? And
absolutely.
The thing about being an entrepreneur is to never get tired of walking yourself through that process over and over again.
Right.
And still trying to maintain those feelings of how you felt when you didn't have it versus what it took for you to get it, right? Kudos to you, cheers to you on how you've done that. Now, tell me about maybe a trip that you've taken over the past year or so that maybe you didn't have the opportunity to take while you were still working at FBO.
Yeah, well, of course, a lot of my travel was impacted by COVID. That was the last 2 years.
Right.
So what I did before I actually moved to Atlanta, my goal was to just stay in an Airbnb. I said, I'm going to stay in an Airbnb for 2 weeks. I'm just going to go someplace and stay there. And at the time, Atlanta was still up in the air. So I just got an Airbnb and stayed there for 2 weeks. And that was something I always wanted to do to really experience my freedom. I wanted to be able to go to different places, work remotely. As long as I have my laptop and my hotspot, I can work from anywhere. Right. And to be able to do that for the first time was pretty awesome. And one day, I just remember saying, I don't feel well. And I mean, this may be a little thing in the grand scheme of things for people, but typically when you don't feel well and you have a job, you got to plan for it. Who's going to cover my desk? Who's going to do all these things? I just remember saying, I'm not doing it today. And I sent an email to my clients who I had appointments with. And I said, hey, can we reschedule for another time? Here's some dates. I'm not feeling well today. There was no, oh, you didn't get approval. So-and-so's off. It just felt good to make those calls for me in the way that I wanted to make them. And the other thing I'll point out too, Charlie, is to your point, man doesn't work, man doesn't eat.
Right.
Well, with that, we can get a raise when we want to too. Because that's, if you work hard, you can, hone in your skills, perfect them, and start to charge more for your services, which means you can give yourself a raise at any time. So I don't have to wait to the end of the quarter or to get a bonus, or I can get that money when I want. And that is so empowering to me.
It's a great inflation hedge.
Yeah.
Let's talk about around the time when we first met. And I remember you being somewhat like timid about your skills and, just where you were at. And, I'm just like, I don't understand why you feel this way. Like,
Right.
'cause I just feel like you're such a star. Like I was blown away again by your professionalism, your kindness, your discipline. And over, you know what they say for most investors, what makes a good investor? It's temperament, right?
Right.
And you have this temperament about you to where even though I know people could try you at work,
Right. Right. Right.
you were still able to, compartmentalize it, bring it down to a level to which you could digest it and
Hmm.
then move in whatever direction you wanted to.
Right.
Right? I absolutely love that about you. And that was a trait that people told me at a young age that I had.
Right.
And I'm glad that I was able to use this skill set to help people. You know what I mean? But
Right.
so talk about that with me right now.
Well, I can tell you, you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. I was very timid in regards to saying I can do this well, because I felt like I was on a team with, pretty awesome people. And, what made my skills so much better, right? But not saying that they were better or I was great or whatnot. It's just what I bring to the table as a person. The unique attributes is the part that I didn't own.
Right.
And it took a minute to really like take a look at them and say, you can do this thing great. And you have these characteristics and they are attractive to people. So you want to be sure to utilize them for your development, not necessarily the development of the company you're working for, but where can that take you? And I didn't have that at the beginning, Charlie. As I stated, I had clients that I had worked with that said I had this thing, but I didn't know how to use it.
Right.
And then the more and more I had conversations, and they would say, you're so professional, you're so disciplined, you don't lose your head, and that type of thing. I started to look at it to say, well, let me inventory myself and see what it is that I can do to make myself even more marketable in this area, because I like to think of that as my superpower, right?
Right.
If I can use that as my superpower, how can I make this work for my business? So in that conversation that you and I had in your office, I remember thinking, what is this guy talking about? I'm not who he thinks I am. And I think too, it was fear of coming across arrogant or something of that nature. And I remember having conversations with you about, it's not necessarily being arrogant, it's being confident in who you are and what you bring. Amen. It's a difference, but I didn't understand the difference until I spoke to, of course, people like yourself.
I couldn't have said it better. It's once you get that understanding and that sense of mind that you know who you are and you are
Right.
confident in your truth,
right?
Nobody can take anything from you.
Absolutely.
And that's one thing that I learned. Well, when I had to go independent, right, of almost 10 years ago, before I got to LPO, that's when I really started. That first year or two is when I first really started to understand just what my value was, right? Absolutely. And I was already at that point in time, what, maybe 8 years in the business, 6 or 7 years in the business, something like that. But being at those large institutions, right, they just want you to be a paper pusher, right?
Right.
And they just want you to conform to their way of thinking versus you listening to somebody, right, and doing what is specifically right for them. And giving them that extra push and that confidence to feel that everything's going to be okay. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Don't have to worry as much as compartmentalize all that stress and take it on when there are certain actions that you can take to change that.
Absolutely.
And I think it's just important that we, as and I say this as a culture, but as Black people, we really got to do a better job of that, in believing in ourselves enough to say, okay, hey, I can do this. Because one of the biggest issues that I see throughout the country is we don't own anything, right? And
absolutely.
That was one of the things that, we had conversations about that. I'm just like, you have this incredible skill set. You should own it, right? And, at the end of the day, that was the same thing that I was told, Charlie, if you're going to have all these different companies come after you, you might as well own it yourself.
Yeah.
Like, kind of right. So, I'm glad that we were able to find that or find our truth,
Right.
in trying to figure out our skill sets and how they were going to adapt to corporate culture or
Mhm.
anybody who happened to be an executive. Because I do believe the skill sets that we have translate very, very well. We listen very well, both well spoken, both very, very diligent and disciplined in the things that we do and the processes that we create. So,
Right.
us providing that process to everybody else is win for everybody. So,
Yeah, it is.
um, tell me a little bit about how you're personally feeling today versus 2 years ago in your current position.
Right.
Obviously, you've had more experience as being an entrepreneur,
Mhm.
and you've been separated from the company long enough to, really, have an opinion about, you know, whether or not this was the right decision to make. Clearly, I mean, looking back in hindsight, it was the right decision to make.
Right. Right.
But you don't always know that. So tell
Right.
me a little about just how you feel, how comfortable you are now, or how not comfortable you are, because it is a lot more pressure.
Right. I'm actually really comfortable. And I left at the right time. You know how people would say, "Wow, if I would have known then what I know now, I would have left earlier." I can't say that. I left when my development for what I needed to get where I am was complete. And I had been working at it and working at it, and it was the best decision for me. I still stand behind it 100%. It was a great company. I learned a lot. I met some amazing people, of course, such as yourself, but my time there was done. And I feel at peace with the decision. And as for just the entrepreneurship journey, I love everything about it. It allows me the creativity to do what I want when I want, but the work is challenging at times. And for me, I like that because it allows me to have creativity to figure out how I want to solve this problem versus someone giving me a solution and trying to make me implement it. I don't like that. And I can say I've learned a lot about me as a person, things that were challenging to me or things that terrify me no longer are seen in that perspective. It's more like, oh, this might be a little bit of an obstacle. Let's figure out how we can overcome it. It's more solution based
Right.
versus me wallowing in the problem of this is wrong, this is wrong. Well, if it's wrong, change it. I don't have to go through an act of Congress to get approval to change something. So I am definitely excited about where I am. I'm looking forward to the next phase of entrepreneurship and just growing because this has been at the beginning, like you said, it is pretty challenging. You're like, what am I supposed to do now? Man doesn't work, man doesn't eat. But at the same time, I've had some really amazing wins. And to have my clients win and tell me they've won,
Mhm.
that is a priceless feeling. I mean, I can't even put that into words. It feels amazing
I
for
love the
my
way your
clients.
face lights up whenever you
Yeah.
talk about this. It's
Thank
amazing
you.
to me
Like,
to
I
see. So
love it.
that same
Carla.
feeling that you're talking about right now, I'm getting that right now. Well, I've gotten that. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like
right,
to
right.
hear you go down this path is a big reason why I really wanted to talk about your story, because you are the perfect example of what I want to help people do. You know what I
Right.
mean? Gain that independence and you know what? Say, F the world, I know I can do this. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and sometimes people, like I said, they just need that little extra push, and
Right.
somebody to kind of help them make sense of things. And not
Right.
that you didn't already have that plan to begin with. Like I said, it was just all you needed was a nudge. That was
Right.
it.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, I know that there are people out there who probably need a little bit more detailed help. And please know that Lone Star Wealth Management is here to help you with those decisions. And I want to help people be better people.
Absolutely.
Be the best version of yourself. You know what I mean? And I think that's incredibly important. And it's just unfortunate we live in a society that unfortunately doesn't preach independence. Oh, I mean, it does preach independence to a certain degree, but not business independence.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? That's a completely different story. And like I said, in our community, we need more ownership of the things that we have, which is a big reason why I never went back to work for some of the big companies. I wasn't feeling it. You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
for me and my talents to be going towards somebody who I'll never meet and doesn't give a damn about me, I just can't do that. That's not how I rock. So
Absolutely.
I think women should really kind of gravitate towards this story because there's a lot of women who are going through the same situation right now.
Right.
In today's world, unfortunately, it goes unmentioned too often. But the fabric of most companies is going to change over the next 20 to 25 years immensely, right? Because one thing I'm about to pull up here, and I want to get your thoughts on it.
Okay.
This is a statistic.
Okay.
Of these are statistics on. You can see this right now, right?
Right.
Okay. On higher education.
Okay.
And how it breaks down from an ethnicity standpoint.
Right.
And these are some of the reasons why people ask me, what made you get into finance, right? And I was
Right.
like, well, partially it was because I saw how individuals were viewing Black men. And I was like, I don't want to be viewed like that.
Absolutely.
Right? So that was a big motivation for me. I had already taken care of the education at that point in time, but once I started to get into this business, I started to look at the fact that, Black men represent probably less than 3% of the overall industry.
Right.
And then once we get in, we're less likely to succeed because for whatever reason, we just decide not to stick with it.
Right.
Now, luckily for me, I've met some great older Black gentlemen and some mentors of mine. And please shout out to those gentlemen. I appreciate you taking an interest in me and helping me along in my career. But none of them ever tried to, like you said, the conversations we used to have, none of them ever tried to impose their will or their way of doing it on me. They just saw that I had specific characteristics that would gravitate and people would adapt to, right? People would like those characteristics that I exuded. So, like I said, one thing about why I chose to be in this business was, the fact that, 14% of, and this is back in 2018, but 14% of Black men weren't getting their college degrees. That crushed me. You know what I mean? Because now it's like, I get why people are looking at me as if I don't know what I'm doing, why I always get second guessed. You know what I mean? And I'm just not going to be a part of that statistic. You know what I mean? I refuse. So I'm glad that I'm part of the upper echelon of that. But at the end of the day, the work's not done, right?
Absolutely.
Because, I want other young Black men to see, the growth that I've had and think that they can do it too. You know what I mean? I want more Black minority representation in this particular industry. I'm sick and tired of going every single conference and only being the only one there. You know what I mean? It sucks.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I get it. You know what I mean? And I realize that if I want something done about it, I need to be the one to change it, right?
Absolutely.
We have to be the one to create that kind of change. Now, the one thing about this particular chart that, I think is pretty dynamic is the fact that women are outpacing all ethnicities and all minority groups all together in order of getting graduate degrees, right? So I talked about the fabric of corporate America changing. And if I don't have more clients like you, I'm not going to win in the next 15, 20 years. There's no way in hell it's going to happen. Women are getting more graduate degrees in droves more than men, right? So therefore, it's only a matter of time before that dynamic changes. So, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just gonna say it's moving fast, and I'm just looking at the chart. Yeah.
So, I mean, in a Black woman especially, I think that, when you think about, bachelor's degrees versus graduate degrees, Black women are really doing their thing. And the numbers are getting much, much better. For Black men, not so much. You know what I mean? We're getting there, right? But we're still lagging behind everybody, and I'm sick and tired of seeing it.
Absolutely.
I want more young men like myself to be accountable to other young men. You know what I mean? And that's why I really try to focus on helping with my nonprofit called Take Stock in Children. But that is something that is so incredibly important to me because the dynamic of how people view us needs to change more than anything.
Absolutely.
The story,
Absolutely.
the story that we have is so unique, so dynamic that you can't just take a couple stereotypes and then plug us all into that one box. It's just not.
Right.
It's not possible.
Right.
So that's why I really wanted to. But how does this particular chart make you feel? Like how?
Well, I'm excited that I am in of course, a group of women with a degree.
Right.
And two, I'm glad that I am on the side where I can help people make an impact to own those skill sets, to make those changes, to be accountable to others, like you mentioned. And I think we become what we hang around. It doesn't matter how you say it, we totally become what we hang around. And if we could create a space where people can have those conversations that you and I have, or we still have and had in the past, you just don't realize the impact, Charlie, that they could have on someone else because I'm not thinking like you. Right. And as a coach, I like to tell people when they say, what do you bring to the table? I say, I'm a disruptor. I disrupt the way you think. Because if you continue to think in the same way that you are, if that was working, then you be where you want to go. Right. Obviously, you need someone to challenge it just so you can open your mind to a different perspective to see, to say this is an opportunity. If we have that in our community, Charlie, just think about that for a second. What would be different, right? Mm-hmm. We would be doing some amazing things.
Right. I completely agree. So switching topics again.
Okay.
Implemented hundreds of practices.
Right.
Met hundreds of brokers.
Right.
Right. But somehow, some way, this smile got you. No, I'm just no, but seriously, like, what was it that made you feel that I could be the one to really help you now?
Right. Well, the day that I got to your office, you didn't know me, I didn't know you, right? So I'm sitting there with a roster of agents I'm supposed to meet with and checking them off as they walk in the door. And I'm like, I'm in this nice space. I'm thinking about going to the beach after work. I wasn't even thinking about having a conversation with you. It was soon as I trained this guy, I'm going to the beach after work. And my colleague I was with at the time says, you have one more guy to meet with today. His name is Charles. And they call him Charlie. And I'm sitting like, I don't know where he is, but I need him to come on in so we can get this done. I can go, right? Yeah. And I see you walking. I'm like, is that Charlie? I'm looking at the list. I'm like, that can't be Charlie. And he comes in, my colleague comes in and says, well, Charlie's here. And once he's ready, you can go sit with him. And I say, well, who's Charlie? And he says, the tall guy that just walked in. And I said, you mean like the black guy? Because my colleague didn't want to say the black guy. So I call out the obvious, the black guy. And he was like, yeah. And I'm thinking, okay, like this is going to be interesting because in all the years that I've been working with the company, I have not met a lot of Black advisors. Even at conferences, I've seen some, and I know that's been something that they've been working on, trying to recruit more minority advisors. Yeah. And I'm thinking all of the years that I've been there, I've probably seen and talked to a few, but not necessarily had the opportunity to work with them. Right. So when I go in and you and I have this conversation, and I was like, well, he's not much older than me. So I'm listening and I'm like, okay. And then you begin to tell me a little bit about your story. And at the time, I didn't know our stories would be so similar in regards to experiences. Right. And it was just overall that you were relatable and you could understand my walk. And I'm not saying that another advisor couldn't, but to be in the same age range, to understand where I'm trying to go and what it's like to get there spoke volumes, and to understand my fear, right? And what I mean by that is, as you know, from looking at clients over your tenure, there's not a lot of African Americans that even invest.
Right.
You got to like pull teeth to get people to even believe, like they see the market, but they believe in the Bitcoin and all those other things they have no idea about most times. But to actually sit down with someone like yourself is not typical. Right?
Yeah, I would agree.
So for me, meeting with you and not even knowing that this was going to play out, I was just like, he's pretty easy to talk to. He understands where I'm trying to go. And you actually began to ask questions. And I don't know if you remember, about me as a person, what it is I want to do. And then you start on, why are you still doing this? You know, you're pretty awesome. You should be doing these other things. But to even say those things and understand the fear, because I remember telling you that I was terrified to step outside of that box. In that moment, I think it was maybe the second conversation you and I had. I said, when I leave this job, you're going to be my advisor. And it was just that conversation and you being able to understand where I was and have some idea of what I needed to own within myself to get there.
I thought that was like the biggest compliment you ever could have given me. Because again, I know how many advisors you've come across.
Right.
And for you to say, okay, well, I mean, clearly he's got the knowledge, but he relates to me better than anybody is all I've ever wanted. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's exactly how I want people to view me. Very, very easygoing person. You know what I mean? Love to have fun with the best of them.
Right.
But, you know, when it comes time to work, you know, it's time to work.
Right.
And, you know, even though like since we started investing, and let's keep it completely honest, right?
Right.
We were at the peaks of the market when you started investing, and we are
Right.
below that, right?
Right.
But yet you still have the same level of confidence in me that you had day one.
Absolutely.
That's tough, right? And that's tough for anybody, you know, let alone to, you know, doing what you're doing right now, being an entrepreneur and, you know, really counting every single penny now.
Right.
But you also realize that this is a process. You know, you've been around this long enough to know that, you know, even though the market fluctuates over time, it goes up. You know,
absolutely.
And, you know, it's just one of those things where you realize that I have your best interest at heart, and I got your back.
Absolutely.
I'm never going to stop doing that. So, if you could tell me, what were the kind of, I guess you basically touched on it, the character, I was going to get into the characteristics that you felt most meshed with yours that you had.
I think it was more of the resilience part, right? We both had some real challenges in our lives, and, you know, we've talked about them.
Right.
But to be able to bounce back from that, to say, I'm still going to do this thing, right? I'm still going to be independent. Because I'm quite sure you've had people around you saying, Charlie, just go get a job. Just go work at this agency. They're going to pay you X amount of dollars. You don't have to worry about all this other stuff. And I think the drive, right? That speaks volumes, because you and I have had conversations and exchanged text messages about just, hey, I heard this thing. Hey, what do you know about this? To be able to have this drive to keep pushing each other and challenging each other, the way we think, things that we're working on. I love that about you. And, you know, to your point, I trust you. I trust your judgment, and trust isn't something for me that you can buy, right? People earn that. And the conversations you and I've had, even when I wasn't investing with you, when I was telling you, Charlie, I'm leaving, what do I need to do? You were like guiding me along the way. I had no idea what I was doing, but you were guiding me along the way, preparing me even before the money came to you. And I just value that so much. And even before I told you I was leaving, you were like, you tell me when you leave and I got you. I have your back. This is going to work out for you, just encouraging me. And for us, sometimes as Black people, you don't really find that. Sometimes it's a competitive spirit. We've never had that. It's more of a, I support you. What can I do to help you? And that is something too that I love that we have in this relationship.
Awesome. Well, that kind of concludes all my questions. If you can please tell the good folks a little bit about your business again, you know, how to reach you, all that good stuff.
Well, most definitely. And I again thank you for allowing me to share. This was a lot of fun. My business is called More Out of Life. Again, more like my last name, Moore. You can find me at moreoutoflife.com or demetramoore.com. And what I typically do is I work with executives, I work with entrepreneurs. So, and also those who are thinking of leaving that job, taking that leap, you're a little terrified. We can definitely connect and actually create a plan that works for you. I love being the disruptor. That's what I call myself, because I come disrupting the way that you think to help you get to that next level in your life. You can reach me at 704-458-8545 or at Demetra@moreoutoflife.com.
One more thing that people should know is inflation is out there, right? So therefore, yesterday's price is not today's price. Just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. But at the end of the day, I really want to have a practice that has more individuals like you. I can't thank you enough for being a client of mine. I love all my clients, but at the end of the day, there's a special affinity I have for few of them that it's more than a transaction, right?
Right.
And I tell people all the time, I'm trying to be a broker for the next 20 years, not just the next two.
Right.
So that's how my practice is set up. That's how it's implemented, and I try to give everybody that level of service and attention. So once again, thank you, Ms. Demetra. It's been a pleasure doing this, and I look forward to doing an update in the future.
All right. Thank you for having me.